Good evening, all. On behalf of Construction Philosophy and the Institution of Engineers India Kochi chapter, I would welcome all of you again, once again, uh, to the session. Uh, I welcome Mr. Vishal to take over. Mr. Vishal, please.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I hope you guys are doing good. So today our topic is little dry compared to what we had yesterday, because it's more about procurement and how we do it, the conditions of contract and all. So what I thought about was instead of going straight into this, and considering yesterday we had a little bit interaction on contingency and how to utilize and how do you consider escalation. So I thought I would start with a little bit of background about uh, how do you calculate that and what should be the thought process. So while we obviously have touch base on CPI and all, uh, what I wanted to get into is uh, I wanted to show you the trends, right? The trends are our friends, which gives you information about the past, what has happened, what is proposed to happen based on the anticipated future, and what are the major items from the cost drivers from your within your project, whether steel or concrete or aluminum or copper or glass or wood or plywood, which are the major criterias which will have the impact on project, obviously the labor as well. If you have your historical database available or you prepare a historical database, that will help you to understand how the trends are moving, right? And based on that, when you either you cost out the cost plan or either you provide your estimate as a contractor, right? As a contractor, if you estimate this, or when you're bidding, you have the basis. um, I'm not going to the private or the public sector. Private is where this will help more helpful. Public, it will be helpful, but you obviously have to go back to CPWD forms and the indexes what they prepare, which I don't really agree with. I have a different index, right? So some of the trends what we have been looking at, in India, and we have mapped it out against various sort of indexes. So let's take the first one, which is about WPI CPI. WPI is wholesale price index. CPI is a consumer price index. So WPI is basically used where you have a wholesale price or kind of for the manufacturer, and consumer price index is for people who are like the people like us, the daily wages or the guys who have to buy things daily. If you see the index from last 2014 to now, we have at least 25% roughly, because I've taken 2014 as my base when I calculated this. Uh, so that is what I have increased in the CPI. But in WPI, I have a much less increase. So there's a huge gap between both, right? This both are like straightforward Government of India publication, and I don't work this index. Index is given by them, and that is where my the thought process what I have is this index is not really applicable. Uh, it is good for thought process or understanding, but it is not really related to India or Indian construction industry. You have to work out your own. That is why I was talking yesterday that you do need to work out your own index based on your firm's historical data, right? So this is where the major gap is. And when you look at last 7 years, 25%, we are basically talking about 3%, 4% escalation, and that is what even CIDC is talking about. Wholesale price index, if you go in detail in wholesale price index, because wholesale price index is a bucket of everything. It's for the general inflation of the economy. Out of that, you can pick up the items which are more related to your project, and based on that, you can work out your own index, right? So this is another method to do that. And in this, for example, I've taken all large impact ones. So you have steel, cement, timber, glass, PVC, diesel, copper, right? Which are the ones which we believe are the major ones which has the impact on project cost. And this is all pre-COVID. So don't ask me about what's going on in COVID, because right now the rates are either not clear, people are not giving the long term, and people want cash first. So that's the economy is completely changed. But this is pre-COVID. This is what the rates were. Obviously, things will change now. But this is to give you indication that, for example, if you had a price of 110 or 115, for example, for like say glass, and now we are looking at say 130, 140. This has happened in last 4 years, 5 years. Now, whether how correct is this? Again, no veracity. The only person you can depend is yourself and your cost database. So you have to look at a ways of getting this data and trying to understand what has been the inflation points, right? Uh, this is for a pure reinforcement steel bars, what we used to have pre GST as well, right? And this is a very standard index. It's basically coming from the sale database. The sale has their own publication every month they publish online, and based on that you can put it. Their cost obviously, with tax and all, you can take out the GST if you want. But this gives you again the indication or understanding about how the prices have moved from 2010 to now. So when if you're looking for another 3 years of 3 years of project, you should know what we're looking at. There will be some dips, like say in 2016 range where we had the dips, but the economy was not really doing so well. So there have been the dips, and there will be increases as well. So there'll be the valleys and the peaks, as we call it. There will be that. And when you're looking at the project cycle, don't overload it as a completely, price is going to increase by 10% all throughout. No, it's not going to happen. You will have a cycle. You will have 2 years, 3 year cycle. But it depends on the project program and when are you entering that peak or valley. So if you're getting into a situation right now, for example, the projects right now may have a better advantage because we are going into a valley and not a peak, right? So that is something you need to look at when you are looking at the construction economic side of it. One of the major issues is labor. Labor and India used to have a huge arbitrage against everyone for labor cost, but now labor costs are really high, and it is not gonna be cheaper, and people are gonna be asking for a more and more expensive cost. The training cost will be required as well because not all the labors are skilled properly. So you need to upgrade those. And there are minimum wages which are getting updated every 6 months. And while this data is based on minimum wages, the real market rates are actually a little higher than what we are giving over here. So that'll be about 700, 650, depends on the pro. Again, it's a very variable scenario, right? Labor, because depends on your requirement, the things would move. So this is again, you need to look at, you need to do your own trends to understand what labor costs you have paid and against what category, and then track it against that. So that is how you can calculate your own indexes, right? Cement for, I mean, this is for diesel. So diesel now, obviously we have a market fluctuated every day. We can have different ones. Earlier it was more fertile, but if you look at it from a plant and machinery point of view, which is like say 10% of your overall project cost, that cost have obviously increased, right? And this is something you need to look at when you look at the P&L cost, right? General economic and inflations as per the market, that is getting dropped at 5.6. Currently, we are going a little bit higher because the economy is not going to do well. So when the economy doesn't go up, the inflation goes up. So you will have that issues coming in. The inflation is going to go high, and that means your all other aspects will have an effect. But at the same time, the market is dropped, and market will have a less amount of work. So contractors' margins are going to get squeezed, and there will be effect on that. So it's very interesting to see how things gonna move and pan out. There are a couple of projects what we have recently tendered, and the actually we were surprised, but the pricing were at least 10% less than what we thought it would be. So we got an advantage because everyone's looking for that work. It's advantage for the client, but not for the contractor, and it is a very dicey situation in that way, at least for next 3 to 6 months till the COVID is stabilized, right? We also did a survey. Now, as a part of Gleeds, we did a survey which was sent out to a number of our clients and even the the site leads and all. And they have provided us a very interesting feedback. Uh, this is something which I am doing it again, and I'll come to you on that. So this was done in the month of May, where we went out in market to understand, because no one knew about what is going to happen now, whether the prices are going up, down, whether labors are gone or still there. So when we did the survey, we wanted, our focus was what's happening on cost. So uh, the interesting read was about 53% respondents were expecting steel price and the cement price going up, right, compared to what we had in market. And that's a majority of people who are feeling the prices will go up to long to medium term. I'm not talking about short term. Short term, obviously, prices have gone through roof, especially for cement and all and concrete RMCs, because the labors are less. There are no supply available in RMC plant, and you need to pay extra and all. But even after stabilization, they feel that the pricing will have a little more effect. But the major part where everyone was more concerned was the labor and contractors overhead or premiums cost. About 74% of people feel that the labor cost and contractors overhead is going to go up after post-COVID, because you need to make sure the labor camps are proper, better than what you used to provide. You need to ensure that all the medical histories and things are being checked. You're doing all the sanitation measures, at least till the everyone is COVID free technically with the vaccination and all. So till that time, all this preliminary is gonna go up. So that is why, and this will probably will be maintained because you don't know when it's gonna come up. So every contract now will ask for all this to be as a minimum compliance. So when you have it as a part of a compliance, which was not there earlier, that means your price is going to go up. So these are the places where we think the prices will increase, and you will have an impact on the project price. Yeah. Right. So I hope that was helpful. Before we started, little dry topic of the procurement and procurement routes. Yeah. All right. So procurement. Why do we do procurement? We as a client or as a owner, I want my works to be done, and I want to make sure that I provide the work in the right analytical manner to the contractors, and I have the best possible options. And when I make a decision, it cannot go wrong. It has to be in the proper. So there has to be a logical way of evaluating things. So that is why you go with procurement. And no, how do we get it done? The best way is to write the procurement strategy along with your project cost plan. Your project cost plan at the stage of schematic. I wouldn't say at the concept too much because you will not have complete information yet. You can start at the concept, have the preliminary, but have a sign off by the schematic stage. So you know exactly how things will pan out, what packages are to be required, and what time frame you need to refer back to. So that is something you need to look at when you're looking at the procurement strategy. So this procurement strategy you need to prepare. The procurement strategy should have all these factors, right? On whether how client is, whether it's a national client, local client, does it have ability to understand the type of project, does the client's team understand the complexity of project they are entering into, what kind of project it is. Is a data center, it is a regular uh, regular building, or it is a warehouse. Can we make changes in the program because there will be future requirements for the changes? How do we make sure that I have that options open? How do we manage our risk? How do we ensure that the pricing what we get is the best possible price? And how do we ensure that the time wise we can manage? So there are various aspects to this. You can have an early start contract, you can have a completely design and then do the work, or uh, or you can just wait for the client to ramp up his team. Depending on all these factors, you need to work on your procurement strategy, right? The major part what we typically see, right, is time, cost, and quality. That's where it ends up. So based on this and based on the risk attached to all these three factors, you have to decide or assist your client to decide the procurement route. One of the ways what we look at, right, and the way we do this is we do a sort of a rating system. So this rating system, and I apologize that this is little hard to read. I'll see if I can increase this. So what we have done here is we've broken down and provided the weightage. So like a typical QS, right? I would like to know, I like to put the weightages that, okay, what are my different weightages for time, cost, and quality, and this get discussed by the client. If client has a higher requirement towards quality, then I will put higher percentage towards that. If my client is more price sensitive, then I will look at the price as a more. Or the project is more time sensitive, then obviously I need to increase my weightage for time. Based on that, and based on each different types, okay, type of the procurement, which we will touch base in the coming ones, you can provide your own on scoring, and based on that, you can get to a judgmental call, a proper scientific way, but still a judgmental call about what is the best possible option to go for. Right? So this is something to look at when you look at the procurement as an option. So you derive a method which works for you and your company, and then come up with the solution that, okay, let's do this way. Okay. So there are various procurement, available. Uh, the traditional and standard Indian way is, design, bid, and build. You will have a full suite of consultants who will be doing the design, and they'll be providing the tender package, the tender drawings, and the contractors will bid towards it, and then they will build up from that, right? And then you have a main contractor, a general contractor as another approach, where you have CM at risk, which is construction management at risk at guaranteed maximum price or warranted maximum price, or you have a self-perform or nominated contractors, or you at times you want the contractor to participate in the pre-construction period as well, right? You also have design and build options. So where either contractor, the client provides a one stage of design, and a combination of design builder will do complete the design and construct it, or you will have someone just telling you, okay, I need a bed for like say 300 bed hospital. Please design it. This is my basic criteria. What I need. These are my basic specifications. You design it and provide. Right? So that's sort of a design and build, and everything is responsible by the contractor. You have also different other approach like project alliances and integrated project delivery, which we just discussed yesterday a bit. But again, these are the various routes available when you go out to market. So it is not just labor or a material or a labor plus material, but there are ways to even look at beyond that. There are, again, you can divide it by the type of how do you want the price to return, whether you want item rate pricing for each item, or you want a percentage based that, okay, my estimate could be 15 crore or 20 crore, I'll take a 3% on that, or I'll take a 4% on that. So based on the profit margins, you have a schedule of rent and you work on a profit margin. Or you can have a labor contract based. So per square feet, I'll give you $500 a square feet for labor contract, or $300, whatever. Or there's a lump sum contract, which is a material plus labor plus plants and everything. There's a lump sum I'm going to give you that it will not go beyond that. Or it is based on square feet, like per square feet, this is my cost. If the square feet changes, my price will change. And you just need to make sure the methodology of doing the square feet, how do you measure the square feet, is agreed upon. You also have sort of cost per key. So for cost per key or cost per bed, like say in hospitals or a hotel, or you can also agree a guaranteed maximum price. A guaranteed maximum price or target price is based on, okay, this is maximum I'm going to spend. I don't want to spend more than this. Beyond that, it will be your risk. So a contractor gives a guarantee that, okay, it will not go beyond that if your design doesn't change, your requirement doesn't change, I'll finish it within this price. If it does not happen, that's my risk. There are contracts which are cost plus, so you can agree a fees plus cost, or you can agree a percentage margin. There's turnkey, there's build, operate, and transfer, or there's a barter as well. In Bombay and some of the places where you have the contractor will say, well, fine, you give me 10 flats and I'll construct the building for you. And then they will sell it in the market as and when the time comes. So there are various way of financial jugglery or the typology what you can play on, right? So going a bit detail on talking about the advantage disadvantages for design and build. So you have design build vendor who will control everyone, all other packages, all the trades what you will decide. Some of them they may do it in-house, depends on their capability and understanding. So if it's a civil contractor, they might do civil on their own. If it is a data center project and MEP is their own, they will do MEP in-house. The rest everything they'll do outsource. So depending on the type of project and the inherent capacity or capability of the contractor, they will do that, right? The advantage is the whole design and construction is done by a single party, right? So it's an advantage that you are not worried about the coordination. It is their job. They have to take care of that. Uh, Buildability, the design and the construction team of theirs will talk to each other properly. So the buildability, constructability it's much easier to attain. The price certainty is it's pure because you can always describe this is maximum I want to get paid, I want to pay. So should not go beyond that, and design build can give you that confirmation. However, the only catch is your requirement should be clearly identified. If you don't, the design build is the worst option you can have, right? Design build has a standard form of contracts, and like say American Institute of Architects and all, they have a standard forms which you can use and you can adopt, and you can reduce your time to time for the project. So I don't need to wait for the whole design to get over. I can start my construction earlier because my design team will churn out the requirements faster to what I need. Yeah. Uh, the disadvantage what I have is the client has to commit to the contract before design is completely done, right? That's one way to, it's little worried that okay, if what if contract the client does not like that end design, then what? uh, Client will not have excessive design reviews or specification reviews because it becomes a little difficult because you're given your requirement to the client, to the contractor, and that's very high level information what you're doing. It is not detailed out, like type of the makes, the smaller details, the sections that is not agreed on. So that is all left to the design builders, and design builder will obviously try to make max out of that, right? So unless you are very clear in your initial design brief, it's very difficult. The competitiveness of the tenders are difficult to achieve or evaluate because there will be some guys who will be having a very high design cost, but their construction cost will be lower, but other way around as well, right? So that is a little bit trouble. You will have there are different kind of design build firms. There are contractors who will do the design and they take design and build with small resource and they outsource the remaining part, or there are other contractors who do it as well, right? So uh, sometimes the design guys will do it and then they'll outsource some part of as a contractor. So uh, in India, it's a little difficult and it is not fully evolved, but it is coming. I mean, design and build is coming for sure for the larger projects and even the fit out projects. But that is something we need to be aware that your design brief has to be 100% clear and what client wants. If client is not sure about this is not the pure design build is not the option to go for, right? Because how India thinks. I mean, if you go in Western world, it's still easier because they have pretty much standard. Okay, I need a school for 300 kids. It should be as per the standards given by Department of Education, and that's fine. But over here, things keep on changing. One of the variations what we adopted to take care of that is we have done the initial concept level designs, sort of a layouts or agreement, so that a client is more or less okay, what was the layout? This layout works for me or does not? What are my basic specifications? So if you have a early stage information, based on that, if I go with the remaining design and build, partial design build, it's still better rather than go with the completely designed build, because here my client already is aware about what kind of options I have. They may have to give some money as a for to the contract for a new designer to give them the options. Sorry, but that actually works out better because they have different options to look at and they can finalize. They don't need to wait for the whole procurement process to get over, and they can have it at the front end, right? So if you have a design build variation as a front end design with a schematic, that's actually better in India. That is what we have used, right? This reduces the risk on the project. However, it takes a little bit more time, right? So another way to look at is we have a general contractor. So in general contractor, what happens is you have uh, sort of consultants like PM or QS, whether it's in-house or outsourced. So along with them, the client procures the main contractor. The main contractor probably would work. They might do some packages in-house, like shell and core or interiors and all, but they will let out all other packages. And whether they will agree as a lump sum, it depends on your design. If your designs are fully evolved, then you will have a lump sum price. But if your designs are not fully evolved, then you can keep it as a package price, and then you can discover the price along with them, right? So GC is, it gives you competitive advantage at the front end. Uh, However, uh, there are ways where you need to evaluate the GC. What packages they're doing in house, what they are not doing in house, and those kind of things. You will not get your early stage design information. However, because your design team is completely detailing it out, you have more comfort level on the quality of that design which is coming through, right? The changes are easy to manage because with the GC and with the packages, you know what tender set is and what the new drawings are, and based on that, you can easily evaluate the change and provide, right? The risk of uncertainty is taken by contractor, and contractor takes care of most of the things uh, after the GC has taken that price, right? And obviously, the contractor will is liable for price or quantity variation if there is a change in the design from the client or the owner, right? So that is something to be looked at. So only when there is a change, one way what we do is when we go the GC route, we ask contractor to review the BOQ, ask them to take care of that BOQ to ensure that they take the complete responsibility towards it. So they take all the measurements, they review the measurements and confirm the quants and the items so that there is no variation later on and they cannot claim for that. Only until unless you change your design. If the design is changed, then obviously the client will pay for that. Right? So this helps in reduction for the risk, mitigation measure as such. Disadvantage in India, it's not very common. So there are less number of vendors who can go for this. The unknown site conditions, which is a worry for most of the places. So that means the contractor prices will be higher, and you will end up paying higher compared to a traditional method. So uh, that's a disadvantage in terms of the price will be higher. If the item reduces, the quantity reduces in the BOQ because your QS had a higher buffer, will not matter because you have to go by the drawings. If the drawings have changed, then only you can take drawings or specs. Otherwise, you can't, right? You will pay a little bit higher overhead and profit for the main contractor for coordination and his risk. If the main contractor defaults, right, that becomes a problem. So that becomes a problem because if you cannot go with the main contractor, that means the main contractor you need to replace. So when you replace, that becomes a problem because you need to go with a new vendor. Uh, you need to go with a new vendor and you need to do everything. Again, you have a performance contract; they may not sufficient enough. So that becomes all that. Uh, right. And if your design is not complete, if your design is not complete, then it becomes another mess, right? because you're going with the design packages assuming that everything is proper. But if there are missing items, missing details in the design, that means your items and cost will change. So that is something you really need to look at, right? If you are going for this approach, otherwise do not go with this approach. It becomes difficult to manage on site, right? So GC, because your design is completely done, there's no buildability input, and GC always has a potential for adversarial attitude. That no, not people are not working along as a team. They are still as a master and servant relationship, which is again not the ideal scenario in my opinion. All right. So other parts is in general contractor you can try to offset some of the price or risk. You can provide basic rates to the contractors. You can if you're able to go with the lump sum, then you can have a schedule of values. So your BOQ goes out, and again everything goes back to your overall bill of quants goes out. But you are basically talking about drawings and the specifications. Your item rate, if you are going with the item rate contract, then you will need to have item rates. Otherwise, you can go with approximate quantification and ask contractor to update the quants or provide the queries. In case any difference, that can be sorted out. You will also need to decide if you are supplying anything directly and up to what level. What are the battery limits for that? So if you are supplying chiller, so are you supplying along with chiller the panel for chillers as well? Are you taking care of its first maintenance, testing commissioning part of it? Are you taking care of the temporary power for that? Or is contractors going to provide it? So you need to decide and agree on your battery limits, how much the battery limits are. So that is something to be looked at. The one of the other aspect and what people have typically done in India is construction management. So in construction management, all the packages are broken down into whatever we need. And depending on all specialists, then we go and buy. This is the standard method of doing for the private, most of the private, I would say. Uh, so within that, you have all the packages, right? And you have one or two agencies who will coordinate everything, right? So construction management advantages, you can have go with early packages. So as long as you have your excavation package ready and available, you can start that package. You can go a little faster. Uh, Everyone is clear about their roles and risk because it's all one-to-one contracts. There's no overlaps. Your changes can happen during later stage as well. Obviously, there'll be value engineering and value management will be a problem, but you can make the changes if you want to, right? The trade package will have a more competitive price compared to the main contractor because main contractor obviously will need to put this pricing and risk and overheads on top of that, right? You can have your tendering process in competition with fully detailed because you will have enough time to go for that, and you can go with better post contract evaluations because your designs are completely detailed and your requirements are done. Only when you keep on changing your design, that's where the things will come, right? Uh, the payments, either you can have a percentage based or based on remeasurements, that can be done because you have the bill of quants available and there are multiple packages. The programs are clear. So your program, the clear understanding about the project program as long as the contractors are submitting it properly. And there's no risk. I mean, there are multiple players available. So if one person does not perform, you have within the site there are other options available which you can put through, right? So you have more availability. Your risk is reduced on that. And uh, in India, it's about the pricing most of the time. That is one of the most cost-effective way to do this. And with the advantage of supplying some of the items or having the basic rate, then this goes well, right? So these are the major ones as a construction management. In terms of disadvantage, there's no single responsibility. So there are multiple vendors and multiple players. There's always be a fight on the side. Like this guy has not given me the space. my coordination is trouble, my site logistic is in trouble because of this, and this, and that there's always needs to be evaluated and discussed. So that is one of the issue what is required. The client needs to take a completely owner driven call because they need to be completely involved. My price certainty for the end project will not come. It will come only towards the end when I'm closing the final accounts, because there are so many packages, and every time either it could be change in design or either it could be change in approach. My price would change. So based on that, there's a de-scoping and all. So based on that, I need to have what is my real pricing. That could I have a oral control, but it is not completed out, right? And then it will require a little more pre-contract time. So there will be still a parallel working, but there will be still a additional time required. It will be parallel work, where the design will keep on going along with your construction period, which is not the ideal. Ideally, we should prefer that the construction period and design period is all adequate. When you're shortcutting the design period, you're not evaluating all the risk, and you are not giving the enough time for value management and optimizing. You are just going for detailed design. So detailed design will come out with the change. So it's better to go with the more pre-con period compared to a standard Indian, which is very less pre-con period. Yeah. So these are some of the points, advantage, disadvantage for construction management. There are other ways what you can look at as options, which is on nominated contractor. So if you like some contractor who's a civil contractor and he's doing only civil, and you want him to take the complete responsibility for coordination and all, what you can do is you can work with a nominated contractor as a thought process. You can nominate and he will work out his pricing based on some, whether fee based or percentage based, and you can devise and agree overall uh, sort of percentage overall responsibility metrics, what he's going to do and not. The only issue what I see typically in this kind of thing is to make sure that uh, the vendors who are getting procured, how are they getting? Are they procured along with them or not? If you are uh, if you are getting procured along with them, that's better, because they can bring in those contractors whom they are comfortable with. So responsibility is actually passed back. If you're doing on your own, and if you're just giving it to him, then the responsibility for him is only towards coordination, right? So performance quality is not part of his scope. So that is something you need to work out, whether you want that or you want it separately. There are variations within the process where you can play and work on that, what responsibility you want to nominated contractor or a or a subcontractor way, right? So the advantage in that is you still have the single point responsibility, you still have the GC giving you more and more buildability inputs, and you have more control. However, your pricing will uh, have a extra. You need to pay extra for profit and overhead to the main contractor, and design has to be completed. You will have to pay more to the trade package, because of the main contractor may not pay them on time. So that is something you need to work out, that the GC has to pay to the subcontractors on time, whether nominated or not nominated. So that is another issue what we see in India. The prices go up because payment cycles are bad. Yeah. Okay. This is another method what we are currently using in some of our projects, which is called guaranteed maximum price. So I have a GC contract. I have a contractor whom I agree his overheads, I agree his percentage margins, and I agree his overall program. And then he goes out in market and he procures everything. So he will procure all the packages for me one by one, and it will be jointly procured. And based on that, I will agree his percentage margin. However, he has given me an overall pricing already, that, for example, if it's a Resi project, I'm going to do the project at price 600. If it goes beyond 2600, then it's part of my risk. So that's one way to control your price and take contractors advantage as a GMP, and you still have the completely open marketplace. So each package you go out for tender, 3 package, 4 package, the GC will arrange that. You can add up your names as a jointly agreed, and then you can go out to market, get the price and get it done. right? So this is another way of one of the nicer way of doing it, which has come up. This is what US used to do. US has it as a guaranteed maximum price, but they don't have the joint procurement. They just submit the pricing. But in India, people are more cost sensitive, that they want to be involved more and more. So what, as I said, we agree contractors overhead and project management fees. We agree profit margins. We agree their overall numbers on what the cost would be, and we have the indicative rates as well. All the installation costs. So even if they go out in market, we should know that what's the maximum value they're going to get to. We also take from them what are they doing in-house and what are they outsourcing. So that will help in understanding, what is the approach. uh, Terms, condition, payment cycle is something to be agreed with them. And because it's a bit more risky, I typically, and my clients are typically allowed within the contingency, I've allowed about 3% or 5% of the value, which works as a buffer. So in case that they missed out something or the project price has gone up in one of the packages, they can take it from the contingency, right? And that contingency is actually better because we still have the visibility towards it. We'll definitely have the visibility towards it, but that will make sure the contractor said, okay, fine, I have this extra advantage of 3%, but I'll make sure that the project is done within this $2,600. Yeah. So this is something as a guaranteed maximum price can be worked at. You have single point contractors contact. You have uh, all price certainty. You know what is your overall maximum price. Until as you change, nothing else will go up. So all this is part of the GMP what you can use. The disadvantages, again, your design has to be correct, and you need to have your detailed design available. uh, it's difficult to break down the competitive pricing, right? So there are formats to be done in a way. It could be customized to the requirement, but it can be done. And the certainty will arrive only when you have the buyouts. When you buy out all the packages, then only you will realize what is the real value, there how much savings or increase it could be. Increase, you have kept it to 3% or 5%, but whether you even that is possible or can we save somewhere, so that can be done only when all the procurement packages are done, right? So these are the advantages or disadvantages for GMP. There are a couple of other procurement routes, which is one is alliance contract. So there are a couple of projects, I think even Kochi, where you had alliance contract. So in alliance contract, the whole project team, including the consultant, including the contractor, would work as a single team. That this is my maximum price, and if they save money from that, then they would share that reward. But if it goes beyond, there'll be a negative as well, right? So this is a method which Tata Realty had used on uh, Trillium, not Trithvam. There is the residential tower in Kochi. So they had used over there with Leighton as a contractor. So that is alliance model what you can use, which is a multi-party contract. Everyone basically works as a single entity, single project, right? Uh, and there's integrated project delivery as a partnering. So again, there are ways. So as I said, Alliance board takes care of it and all. It's directly on a open book format. So whatever goes on open book, plus all the add-ons on top of that as a percentage or fees, whatever I agreed. So that is alliance contract, which you can use. Partnering is a little different way, where you talk about a management approach, which emphasize a collaborative relationship rather than a short-term issue. So you basically do it on a longer term, right? So how do we conclude all this, right? I mean, that's a major issue. How do you conclude all this? You need to consider that all your you write down what are the issues, right? And what are the major driving points, whether factors beyond control of client or the client resources are good, strong, as I said. What kind of project is it, ability to make change, or the risk management or cost issues or the timing or the quality. So based on all that, you will derive your own method. So what I shared earlier about the metrics, about how do you select the procurement route, you can based on that you can conclude that. So you Go through all the options, understand what is required, and then you do. Right. Uh, Sorry. So once you decide how you move, what kind of project procurement route you're taking, the next strategy you need to decide is how are you doing the packaging? What packaging and what item goes where? So give you little, sorry about the image, but this is best I could do here. Okay. So for example, who's gonna do what? Whether shore piling is separate package, excavation separate package is part of one and two together. Civil works, what all would be required to be done within that items, whether waterproofing is a separate package or part of the main contract. So in this case, sorry, in this case, we had all these packages as part of a main package contractor, which was supposed to be done. And then you break down all finishing, all facade, whether it will be done as part of the main package or separate. So you write down all these packages, what is required for the project, along with your schematic cost plan. So you know exactly how the project is to be priced. At times, what I've seen is even experienced QSs, they price it as per a standard trade package, but they don't realize that this is a GC model, or the client is expecting a different way of procurement, and they will come less than what the contractor will quote, and much less than then there's a huge gap, right? And that becomes a problem. So that is something to look at when you are doing this packaging strategy. So you decide your packaging strategy, you decide how you're going to do it and how the coordination needs to be worked out. And then you decide all these packages as well. As part of that, you also decide what are your direct supplies. What are you going to be providing directly to the client? So a DG or a chiller plants or STP or what, whether you're tying it separately or you're tying it within in one of these packages. So once you have this clarity, what happens is your procurement schedule becomes much faster. So you know exactly what you're buying and how you're buying, right? Coming to once you decide on your packages, next thing is how do you go with the contractor? How do you go with the, how do you get the contractors on board? So let me just share with you another file, right? So what we do is, uh, I'm sure all the companies would have done, right? All the packages, and how do they, sort of do the pre-qualification. So we also do our own way, and depending on the project, we customize. So depending on like where the company is located, and we how long it has been in function, and whether it has a number of employees, what we require for the project or not, right? So based on that, we derive the percentages. Then we also put what is the financial status, what is order book values, what is the turnover percentage, whether are they making money, for example. If they're not making money, it's going to be bad sign. So looking at all that aspect, and we also look at the specific experience, what they have, what do they have, they done the high rise or not, or for a high rise project, or have they submitted the subcontractor, how they're going to do that, and how they're submitting the quality policy, safety policy, do they have all the standards available, do they know what to do, right? And then we go specifically into the type of projects they've done, whether they're globally or locally, what they've done in past. So based on my project of that particular, then obviously we break it down. Per project we give, per year we give. So they should have done 4 projects or 3 projects, whatever, and the type and typology of that project, and then we break down. So based on that and the type of services, do they have the pre-con team available? In this case, for example, we needed someone who can guide us in the pre-con because it was a high-rise 300-meter tower where we needed help from constructability point of view. And do they have the in-house teams for design or software, or have they worked in, gone into arbitration litigation? Do they have sort of a good client reference or not, right? So all this are sort of we do to evaluate the contractors. So there will be vendor 1 to vendor 9, and you can select the ones what you want and take. I'll swap back to my PPT. Just give me 1 second. Right. Okay.
Right.
So once you decide your pre-qualifications, then you need to work out your tender event schedule, right? So tender event schedule, which has your, when you're gonna float out in market, when you're gonna get it back, and when are you doing the round one, round two, round three negotiation and finalization. So this will help the project programmer to understand how much time you're gonna take, right? So that is something to be worked out as a TS. Type of form of contract varies in India. So you have CPWD, Indian Institute of Architect, FIDIC, American Institute of Architect, or a customized version of that, World Bank kind of thing, or a bespoke contract writing. In India, people love doing bespoke contract. People don't want to use FIDIC; they want to change everything in the FIDIC, and they will have their own different versions. Every project will have their own different version, right? So there are various forms which are adapted if you're working in the private sector. Uh, the tender document, I'm just going with a very basic thing. It has all these documents which are the basic and important ones, right? The GC, general conditions, special conditions, commercial conditions, annexures, the technical specs, tender drawings, bill of quantity or schedule of quants if required, safety, quality requirements, and the templates. So all these are part of my tender package when it gets together and I send it out to the contractors. All right. So what do we need to look at when we prepare the contract document? Oh, sorry, tender document. So we need to look at the project schedule. Is project schedule proper and adequate? Does it talk about the milestones? Does it can it be done in this price? Because what's going to happen is, if you provide a 6 months program and your site is not ready, that means you're going to go your project schedule will go out, and then contractor will ask extra money and you will be in bind, right? So your project schedule needs to be 100% correct. Then you need to look at the defects liability period. Are we talking about 12 months, 24 months, or much larger? And what kind of guarantees we are looking at? No. Then performance bonds. Are we taking a performance bond or not? Are we taking EMD, which is earnest money deposit for taking part of the contracting process? What sort of advance payment are we looking at? What are the billing cycles? And is that the cycle time proper? 45 days, 60 days, 30 days, whatever it is proper or not? What retention are we keeping? Are we keeping against a BG? Are we keeping against cash? Uh, what are safety quality holds? The milestones as such, uh, and how are we taking off suspension and the termination criteria. So this is something you would look at properly when you look at the contract, the tender document, not contract. So once you have all the tenders, what you need to do is you will need to do the comparative statements. When you do the comparative statements, uh, you will have obviously the commercial criteria. However, doing only on the commercial criteria is not the right way. You need to divide it into uh, a techno-commercial criteria. That's the better way to do that, rather than just giving a L1, L2, L3. Agreed that you have pre-qualified the contractor and contractors are good enough to participate. But depending on this particular project, in this particular way, does he have right person? Does he have? Is he providing right person? Right? Does he understand the project schedule? Does he understand the site setup? Is he providing required resource mobilization plan, which is as per the requirement? Is he considering right plants and machineries? Right? Then are we looking at all the client referencing properly or not? Right? Then we look at the commercial side of it. How is he pricing preliminaries? How is he pricing QROs? How is he pricing the trade packages? And what kind of terms, what he's agreeing or not agreeing, whether he's agreeing. Ideally, in the government contract, if you don't adhere to any of them, it's all gone. But in private, what happens is we all negotiate again. So whether he's agreeing or not agreeing or moving, based on that, I can have my own standing. So my techno-commercial criteria will give me a different working compared to what we have, right? And I would, my suggestion is never to go with only L1, L2 process. L1 could be technically high, no doubt about it, possible. But you need to work it out in a way which is a scientific way to analyze the performance and then put down the cost, right? So you could give a higher to commercial and lower to technical, or you could go other way around. So depending on what you think is better, you can go for that, right? So this is one of the way what we do when we analyze now. We just don't go with L1 L2s. Especially in the private, because that is now gone. So some of the things what you need to consider when you're looking at the negotiations, right? You need to look at QRO, right? Quote rate only items, because most of the times these items are the items which does not get negotiated. Contractor puts any price what he is happy with, and this item goes out. You need to look out the abnormal items. You can do average minimum and maximum price, and you can identify the items which are abnormal. You can look at 80-20 ratio, the Pareto's law, where major items you need to go in more detail to understand how the pricing has been done. You need to ensure that the approved bakes are proper, and everyone is quoting based on approved bakes. Unfortunately, in India, what happens is we have approved bakes of 3-4 different suppliers, but the prices of each of them is separate. So we don't really know what contractors quoted on what make. So typically, we try to agree with them that okay, which is your base make, and if it changes, then what is the second option, right? But the first make is what he has to go with, and I have to prove that this material is not available in the market when they procure, right? So this is something which pinches the client quite a bit, because, for example, if he has agreed a dorma is a fitting for door, but if the consultant had given, apart from dorma, they've given half lay as well, or they've given SS, there is a price difference or derivation between both, right? So how do you take care of that? That is why this kind of approach is required. You also need to look at all the conditions and exclusions, especially there are places where they will talk about the access to the site, they will talk about the water power connections and all. So that you need to look at. You can also ask them the rate analysis for major items, which you can use for in future. One of the things what my boss had told me about the reinforcement, the wastage of the reinforcement, whose property is that, right? If contractor has counted a percentage waste as a part of rebate, isn't it part of my client's property now, right? Technically it is, and there are projects where we have enforced that, right? It's not something what we like to do, but that is something can be done, right? So that is one of the wastage is part of where you can look at. So that is why you need to take the rate analysis for major items, especially for RMC and all. So you know what the basis is. And you also need to ensure that the basic rate fluctuation process is clear. In one of the projects in Chennai, what we had done was we had taken the basic rate fluctuation for steel and we have linked it to sale index. So what you saw earlier, the sale index working, we had linked to that. So contractor will get extra money and he will get it based on the sale index rather than getting a market discovery. This was a better way to do this, right? And obviously, you need to look at and I'll just touch upon that again. Why I'm saying that index fixed is better is we know that you always get 2 quotes, 3 quotes from vendors. So, for example, if you got a 1 quote from the vendor and that is not negotiated, and then you get a better pricing later on, the client is not gonna know. So, if you have an index base, that works out better because it's transparent. Whether it's an additional or reduction, based on that, it's open, right? So again, apart from that, you look at the advances, you look at the payment cycles for that. You look at the retention, the BG or whatever. So these are the parts what you take care of the negotiation to ensure that everyone's on the right items. All items are covered. There's no items missed. Right. Coming towards end of it, there are some examples of best practices. Some of them I already shared with you during my yesterday and today's discussion. So, like for example, when you do the cost plan, try to do as much as possible as a breaking down at the stage. Have a sign off from the client, benchmark with the similar projects, and have a checklist for the cost plan. Right? Contingency escalation. Don't do a percentage basis. Do it based on scientific ways of doing it. Whether it's a 5%, 3%, it does not help. Right? Bill of quantities. Make sure that you have the peer reviews done for the larger packages. You ensure your benchmarking ratios are done, like plastering to say block work, or RCC to formwork, or reinforcement to RMC, or cubic meter. So based on that, you do your benchmarking, you do your checklist for all the major items, and make sure that everything is tied up, cut, fill, or whatever. Your tender document, make sure that you have completely understanding of the contractual condition. QSs are not the legal guys, and there are implications when we put things in the tender. So you need to ensure that the legal team is completely aware what we are doing. And how do you make sure that you have the long-term contract, annual rate contracts, or lump sum conversions to reduce your risk, right? Some of the other post-contract processes, which I'll just touch with. Obviously, Sini is going to take care of that. But as part of post-contract, you need to provide a handbook to the contractors. So contractors should know what way they have to submit the documents, how they're going to submit it, and all. What documentation they need to submit with each and every bill. So there is no way the contractor will come back and, okay, you did not give it to us earlier, and now we have to get all this document. It's going to take time, and my payment cycle goes on. You need to understand, as if you're working as a consultant or a client QS, you need to understand the project will not move if you don't pay to the contractor on time. You need to make sure the contractor gets his cash flow adequately and as required. And whatever you can do to help him out doing that is your job, right? So you need to make sure he has his cash flow. So if you provide a post-contract handbook, he knows from the day one that this is what is required. Then you need to ensure that the item, if there is a variation, you agree the price before it goes for construction. After construction, it should not come for the commercial sign-off. You need to have your monthly cost to complete forecast properly so that there is no forecast issues later and there is no surprises. You need to ensure that the monthly cost plans have been submitted to your stakeholders with any concerns what you have for the client, right? And because you will be working on multiple packages and client will not have so many package, make sure that you provide your knowledge transfer from project to project. Yeah. So the lessons learned is identify your scope, clarify your scope, understand your site conditions, understand your planning and plan for your contingency and the changes. Make sure your project is accurate. You do your value engineering and options properly. You make sure that you have proper approvals for equivalent makes and the products. You have all your basic rates sorted out and the process of approvals are proper. Procurement strategy is clear and you know your market trends. If you have all this, right, if you do this properly, there's no way you can mess out a project. Your cost management will be done properly. Yeah. So concluding the session, construction projects are complex. There are multiple variables, there are multiple players. It is not the easy task. And there are factors which are out of your hand. So there's not to be taken lightly. You need to appreciate the type of product what you're dealing in, and you need to understand what your baselines are. The cost must inform the design so they can make the right decisions. Be clear about the design ratio, the parking ratios, the FOH to BOH, to the common areas, corridors, to the apartments, or balcony to other balcony areas to the buildings. Understand all that before you go ahead, right? You need to ensure that you need to have the material and labor trends clear. Set up your realistic budgets to ensure that you don't have shortfalls and you don't underquote when you price it out. Do clear design management and procurement process. Anticipate the contingency what is required, and have a proper control in place to deliver the project. Right. That's it from me from the presentation side, and happy to take the questions here now.
Yeah, in Indian scenario, the contractors play some tricks to become L1. For example, if they are not quoting the rate for one particular item in the BOQ, when you calculate, they will become L1. How do you counteract this kind of tricks to normalize them? What kind of normalization techniques you use in the BOQ?
So when we look at one, obviously we do our internal pricing. So we know what pricing should be, the real price. Second, when we do the average, lowest and medium, when we do that, we identify the items which are creating a large havoc compared to what the market is talking about. When you do that and when you compare that along with your 80-20 ratio, you know the items which are abnormal and which something you need to look at. You focus on that when you negotiate with the contractor. You question them. I mean, when you're negotiating, you have all the right to question the price because you are the QS on the job. Based on that, I believe you should be able to adequately cover yourself and the client.
Okay, basically you mean to say you can replace this with a realistic in-house quantity cost estimation in that location and then prepare the comparative statement?
Yeah, you would definitely do that.
Yeah.
You, I mean, internal pricing is required, whether you're working with a client or a consultant. You need to have internal pricing because you cannot depend on the contractor's price.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Himanshu, go ahead.
Yeah, hello sir, nice presentation I must say.
Thank you, Himanshu.
Well, I'm going to ask you a very precarious situation, and with your expertise, I must myself get educated on it. Let's say in the rating system, you rated a contractor, let's say he's a blacklisted contractor, and you graded him maybe below average on the as far as the credibility is concerned. But that same contractor has opened a new firm and bid the same contract. And how do you identify, or how do you use your expertise to, you know, obviate that such blacklisted contractors don't bid with some other firm which is newly opened and, you know, get contracts?
So that's part of the pre-qualification process. So when you do the pre-qualification process, you would know what contractor's capabilities are, whether he has listed out or blacklisted somewhere else, and there are disclosures against that. So if you're talking from the perspective that, okay, there is a grade B contractor, grade C contractor who's not good enough, and there are few contractors who are the new contractors in the market and who do not have the adequate, say, experience levels, right? If I'm pre-qualifying it, if I'm asking a contractor to come in and be part of the tendering process, I have my set criteria against the project that this is what my minimum requirements are. If they're falling within the threshold, fine. If are not, and if there are other things to consider, for example, you would also see situation where people are quoting jointly as a JV, right? So how do you take care of that? Who's the leading partner in that? How do you take care of that situation? So that also will come in, that okay, whose experience really need to be taken or who's not to be taken, whether he has uh, just like say Simplex, for example, right? Simplex had huge financial issues recently. So you, because you are market, you know what is going on ground. So do we want to call them? Are they giving the information which is right or wrong? You will be able to analyze when you get the data back. And okay, no, this is not correct because I know they have, like for example, they have 6 arbitration case, just to give you an example, but they are not disclosing it. So you will know that they are not disclosing it properly. So based on your market knowledge of the project team, you will be able to decide who are the right players who can think about or can work on this project.
Sorry, actually, I wanted to put it across maybe in a different manner, because see, I am a contractor. Let's say, assume that I'm a contractor who doesn't have a good credibility because of my XYZ reasons. Now, I have a brother whom I want to bid in the contract. How will you identify that the bids that I've quoted through my brother and the credibilities, and I have asked him to make a, because see, at the end of the day, if my profession is contracting and bidding contracts, I will I'm not going to sit with idle without work. So I'm going to find ways and means to, you know, find work. So in that bargain, you know, maybe I'll find ways and means. I've told some other person I've opened a new firm, and I've bid the contract, and it's come as the lowest bidder. So, I mean, I'm just trying to extract your maybe experience, and if you have something in mind on this. Otherwise, it's okay.
Himanshu, sorry, but I'm not able to clearly understand your question.
Maybe we'll check it out some other day. You can continue.
Vishal, can
Sure.
I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
So you said you have different packages of contract in which by which we can implement a project, like FDIC, then design and build, etc., etc.
The form of contract.
A form of contract. And
Yeah.
somebody was asking about the cost and time overrun risk in each package.
Yeah.
Then you said it depends on the client.
No.
Okay.
What,
No. Okay. It depends on the
Okay.
client. But I am saying I have a client, and that client is choosing from different package, and the aim is lowest cost and time overrun. In that case, which one will you recommend to that client? That is my question.
Okay, so if you want to have the lowest cost and time overrun, first make sure your design packages are completely done. Assuming that your design packages are completely done, I can go with a single package GC contract because my design is fully coordinated. The problem in India is the designs are never coordinated properly. That is why you have to break down. And when you break down, the implication will come whether you like it or not. Because designs are, when they are not coordinated, when you go on field, the field will have and require changes. All your MEP drawings, if you see right now, they are not really good for construction, right? They go with a tender package, and from tender package to the GFC level, that's a huge difference, right? Because your MEP is not detailed enough. Because your MEP is not detailed enough, interiors will have change. Interiors will have change, will have an implication on time. So if you want to make sure that your time and cost are paramount, right?
Yes.
Then you need to make sure that you have the right amount of your design done properly.
Yes, suppose the design is given to one person who is constructing the entire thing, then that is his responsibility to see that the design is also within the requirement of the client.
Yeah, so that is design and build approach then.
So then automatically the design and build will come in picture when you are giving thrust for the cost and the time overrun issues.
Okay, so now, okay, let me ask you the counter question. In design and build, if you do not give the requirement, proper requirement to the design builder, are you not exposing yourself to the claim?
No. See, that is different. You have to put that question to the client before you enter into the agreement with the client.
Correct. So that is what you asked me about the Indian ways, because things keep on changing here. Just think about how many times the bylaws in India has changed. The building heights have been asked to revise. All this needs to be kept open, right? The clients are not ready to sign off because things keep on changing.
Yeah, that is Indian scenario, but we can understand that. But this is a question where the client has to be asked by the contractor or the person who is taking up this job in the very beginning, and that should be put in the contract as a special condition that all the requirement of the client should come in a single time, and no revision should be happen in any of the time period of during the construction. That should be put in the contract condition with the client and the designer or who is taking up this job. Then there is no question of taking back from the first design.
So yes, so there are various levers you can use. You can use KPIs, as I said when I was responding to Sini. There are KPIs you can use to implement that as part of your contract. There are various things you need to consider before you put it in as a scenario, because the scenario what you have today will change tomorrow. Your contract needs to be adequate to cover that.
Okay, and also you referred about the FDIC conditions. That is a good way of doing things. When we go for the World Bank or this Tokyo JICA projects, they are mainly with the FDIC conditions.
Agree. But what happens when you go with some of the projects here locally? And I'm focusing more on private because that's where my expertise is.
Yeah.
All the FIDIC clauses are being diluted.
But private is a totally different field when we talk about the
Oh.
the government.
No, I would also like to add to it, Mr. Rajendran. Basically, see if even if we don't intend to change the design, sometimes actually, most probably mostly in private sector, private construction, we might be forced to change a few things technically and in terms of design. When there is a criteria wherein you have I mean basically the bylaws. See, for example, in Kerala, you don't have height bylaw for height more than 20 meters. That was a scenario a couple of years ago. And if you want to construct a building higher than,
20
taller
meter.
than 20 meters, then the whole thing have to be redesigned. The whole bylaw have to be changed, particularly for this building.
Okay, then you are ending up with a good reason for the cost and time overrun. Nobody
Yes.
can have a other way of doing it because it
And-
has
and-
come in as a statutory requirement.
Yes, and again, actually, for this particular reason, actually, we have to spend 2 years.
Yes, that is,
And
you have to live
and
with
again, the site conditions, especially when constructing the foundation. So probably, maybe maybe after a certain depth, you find some contingencies or you find some uncertainties in the soil, some ambiguities. Then again, you will have to go back and redesign it.
that. And soil investigations are nowadays you can depend fully on that. If you
Yes,
are
but there are
sufficiently taking boreholes and you are appointing a good soil expert, then you can depend on him. What exactly happening in our situation is we take 2-3 trial pits or bores, not in the building area but in the corner of the plot. Then when you go to the center of the plot and do the construction, you are coming with encountering so many things and you are blaming the soil investigator. See, there should be a very good consultant who should guide from this first
So
site visit, soil investigation, the boundary fixing, set out, height, everything.
Okay, so let me talk about the soil investigation part. Who decides how many boreholes to be done in an acre? Who
Yeah,
decides?
there is IS code provisions.
There is IS code provision, but does it happen?
Yeah, then we are talking about something different.
It does not, because we don't take the adequate representation.
PMC will decide. If PMC is there, PMC will decide.
Yes, that PMC, if is very experienced, then they will say, as per code, if only one borehole is required, we go for 2 boreholes in the diametrically opposite direction. Then that is a experienced PMC. Then that will give.
If you have a PMC, now,
yes.
Agreed. If there's a PMC, now what happens is most of the times geotech reports are done much in advance of anyone coming on board. The client would have, when they bought the land, they just got the geotech done just to see what kind of soil they're going to encounter as part of the technical due diligence. And that report typically goes around everywhere when you're deciding the BOQs for excavation or piling, right? So that is where the problems start.
Yeah, I have a very bad experience. I can share in a short time. So when I took over charge of a very big building project in Kerala, the consultant was a French consultant. They decided the foundation with a raft. No, not with raft. That is diaphragm wall with the soil layering. Okay.
Right.
Anchoring. Diaphragm wall and contiguous pile combination with this anchoring into the soil. So are you
talking about a shoring system?
No, diaphragm wall. It's a diaphragm wall. The diaphragm wall is a wall constructed by a retaining wall, and that can be taken into as a part of the building after construction. Okay, and it is anchored into the other side of the plot. This plot is 2-3 bays deep, 20 meters down. So I asked the consultant whether you investigated the foundation of the adjacent building. They said yes. Somebody told them it is a raft. So the soil nailing or the anchor will go below the raft and you don't worry about the things happen during the anchoring. I said you investigate further and see whether it is raft or it is actually piling or the height of the raft is to be determined. So they investigated further and they come up with the result that it was completely with the piles. So the anchoring will collide with the pile and this anchoring of the diaphragm wall is not a good solution in that project. So that is because of the poor soil investigation and poor data collection before deciding something which is very important for a project. So this is happening in Kerala and about a year as we lost. And cost also escalated.
Mr. Rajendran, were you there in the previous program, Forensic Structural Engineering?
No. This is my second class.
I think we have gone back to that program now.
No.
Okay.
No.
We had actually,
Yeah. So many. See, the experienced people say something that is better than we listening to this kind of so many things. See, I had 34 years of experience in the construction. I have never come across a good soil investigation report. Every time we have to go for another soil investigation and again. In my last site, I did 3-4 times. IIT Roorkee has come in picture and then they ask for more and more boreholes.
Yes.
Why is it happening like this? Because in the early stage, there was no advice from a good engineer, civil engineer, who can advocate everything like a foundation, soil investigation, geo, everything, groundwater problems.
Maybe you can get to 2 laboratories same time. It will help. Maybe the laboratory.
That could be one option. Yes.
Multiple same material which you are boring and the splits you are taking now. You can get to 2 laboratories. Normally, when the splits are taken, they don't analyze it properly in the laboratory. It's depending on the technician who actually go with the silt content, soil content. No, it will not be done properly. So the options can be, since you are suffering here and losing money, you can give simultaneously 2 laboratory.
So that is about the result. But the way we are doing things are different. What Vishal said is correct. When you get a land acquired for a client, immediately they will ask for somebody to come and do some boring and get the soil tested. So this man will come and do some boring at the edge of this plot and get the money and he go away.
That's what he said about the pre-qualification of the boring by contractor.
Yeah, the whole team should be pre-qualified. In fact, actually, it's an unfortunate situation which exists in our country, not only in Kerala. Actually, mostly some of the states we have. Even I have the weird experience, like this in most of the states wherever I go. But we, on a safer side, we go for more bores. And we take a little bit more precautions, and especially in kind of soil here in Cochin, we have to be more careful. I think we have to go back to the topic now. Mr. Vishal.
Yeah, Mr. Vishal, I have a unique question. As PMC or cost consultants, when you deal with the large corporates, there is no guarantee that the PMC or cost consultant will sit during the negotiation, because the client's centralized procurement will take care of it. So for that kind of arrangement, what kind of negotiation strategy you recommend to the client? Because recently I happened to sit in one of the negotiations as a special invitee. I was surprised to see that the negotiation did not happen. What actually happened was the client's commercial team started bargaining. They didn't actually know the difference between bargaining and negotiation. So
I agree.
So what kind of inputs you will give as a negotiation strategy to the client's commercial team?
So there are 2 issues, right? a client would like to keep the numbers within themselves, and they don't want to disclose or sort of worry about the problem of the information getting passed by one to another. So that is the reason they don't allow other people to join in, and that is unfortunate because the guys whom clients use at times for the negotiation, they are not technical people. They are basically standard procurement guys. They don't understand the difference between like 4-core to 6-core. They know there is a difference in pricing, but they don't know the real difference or armored to non-armored, right? So what are the technical, why the labor cost will go from one to another, it will change or not? They don't understand that. And they just talk about margin, okay, you are too high, you are too high. And that's what happens. Rather than a proper discussion, it just becomes a round of, okay, you depreciate. And we have, as a professional QS working in this industry, we have faced this issue on a number of projects. And what we have realized is, wherever we have been participating in the tendering process, we have added value to the client. One way what you can do is you can the clients can provide the submissions of the contractors without any names. They can just say, okay, this is contractor A, contractor B, contractor C kind of thing, and provide independent view by the QSs or PMC who are working on it. And QS and PMs can provide based on that, based on BOQ or submissions, they can provide it back. You can also do it online. If there's a e-tendering process available, that's another way to do it better. So I had one client, Chinese client, who didn't want to name any of the vendors, but they wanted our inputs. So this is the way what they were approached, and I really liked it. They give out me the package without any information. I cannot relate it back, but I can provide my views that these are the places where these guys are wrong, and they can negotiate to them directly. So that's one way you can look at.
Yeah, and I have another unique situation. We have a practice that we do only the technical bid evaluation separate, and commercial will take up later. But it will not happen parallelly. First, we will do the technical evaluation. Then whoever is technically qualified, only those commercial bids will be opened. If
Correct. So I think this the approach what we do is, if we are pre-qualifying the vendors, then all the vendors have the equal right to participate, and they are more or less technically qualified, right? So if you do a pre-qualification properly, then you're fine. If you don't do pre-qualification, I mean, recently I had sent out a tender on electronic platform, which was open to everyone. Everyone in the world could participate, right? So we got lots of tenders, and some of them were not even qualified. So we had to spend time to discard those guys who are not eligible to work on that project. So ideally, if you do a pre-qualification, that is better. The only thing is, when you don't do that, when you have less amount of people, because you are not sure about the vendors, and there are other vendors which your team may not have come across. So you're not opening out to the world. So there are pros and cons in both the aspect.
Yeah, Vishal, can I take a question?
Yes.
Good power-packed, informative session, we can say. Okay, my question will be, you talk about price indices, right, in India, price indices and consumer price indices. And you said that from 2014 till 2020, it was 24.5%, if I'm not mistaken, for the wholesale price index, and another one, consumer, was around 9 or 10. Is that correct? So is that likely led to the escalation? Can we consider that this price indices can be taken as an escalation percentage, or am I quoting it wrongly? Can I say that escalation is...
Okay, so I'm sharing the screen so that we all are on the same page. Yeah. So to answer your question, this is what the trend is talking about, right?
Yes.
My problem here is, this is a general CPI and WPI, right? Okay. And this does not give me the right picture, because it has everything attached to that. So even if there are all weightages in the economy, you have some weightage for steel, and this is not a construction specific. So you will have items which are not related to you, like food grains and all, right? This is all added up over here. So if you're really looking for a pure construction inflation index, then this is not the right approach. It can give you indication, but it's not the final one. So what I would prefer doing it, and we have done as Gleeds, what we have done is we have taken a small project, say a commercial building, and we are pricing that building every 6 months. Okay, we are repricing it as per the rate what we have today. Okay, so that gives me a
if I'm a client, if I'm a contractor, say in the beginning of my, let's say 5-year project or 2-year project, you can say, I have to, as a contractor, I have to give the escalation percentage to the client, right, for getting the contract. And I have to sub-package the contractor. I have to sub-package the contract later on, like you say, MEP, finishes, I am sub-packaging the contract. So they will, the specially sub-packaged contractors will be bidding me. They can claim on me the escalation, right?
Sure.
So how I will balance, which is because I already given a commitment for my escalation percentage to the client, and the sub packaging will be claiming on me based on the escalation. So where the balance will come, which person should work on? Yeah.
So you need to allow for an escalation when you do the main bid with your client, right? Okay. And what percentage to carry? If you ask me, as per CIDC is talking about 2 to 3% year on year. But I know that 2 to 3% is not sufficient enough for you. When you look at the labor price like this, is it gonna be adequate? No, it is not gonna be adequate for you. So my typical range is about 3.5 to 4% year on year. This is what I carry when I do my projects.
I agree. And going back to again one of your comments on the presentation regarding the LDs. No, LDs are not applied in India. You said a comment on that. Liquidated damages are not applied in the contracts in India.
No, okay. So let me re-answer that. So liquidated damages are there in each and every contract, but to apply that and negotiate and do that in a private sector, especially, I'm not going to government. That is a huge task.
And you said that there is some I couldn't get that. You said the solution on that yet, package wise or milestone wise submission to the headquarters.
So we hold the money. We hold that money.
How you define that in the contract? How you define that in the contract conditions?
You can put it as a sub milestones for the packages.
Okay. Or if I appreciate if you can share in the participants. If you can share the conditions of contract, no private clients you cannot, or because I know that you have a lot of information, so it will help, because here when we allow the packages, everything, almost all the contract conditions are covered. Now, for example, like now if I write a letter to the client, to the package guys later on regarding any not submission, regarding the spare parts of during the maintenance, so each are covered in the package contract conditions. So it will help us in claiming or negotiating a later stage, post-contract stages, because everything is defined in the package contract condition. So something that can help us. If you have anything in mind to share.
You want a standard conditions of contract?
Yes, if you have for the private use, because you are working for so many private contracts now. So if you can share anything, it's if we can. Otherwise, no issues. Something confidential.
Okay, fine. I'll give it to Nebu.
Okay, thank you.
But Chibu Thomas, can I ask you one question?
Yes. Please.
Thomas, in CPWD, it is everything is given in detail.
Okay. For the
so private is different. Of course, private is different, but private people can build on this one. Slightly modifying the CPWD norms are very good option for a private agency.
So it's published in the website or CPWD website.
Ah, yes, CPWD. This is a very comprehensive thing.
It is there online.
Online also, you will get everything. What is the LD condition? What is the escalation? What is price variation? Basic price, negotiation. Everything is there.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Shivaraman has commented on that statement. Actually, CPWD contract will not stand in arbitration. It is one-sided. It is right, actually, in a lot of sense.
I don't know. CPWD will not stand in arbitration.
No, it will stand in arbitration, but the answer is yes, it is a one-sided contract. That is also
One-sided
true.
contract.
One-sided contract means, I don't know. How you can say one-sided contract?
One-sided means, I think what Mrs. Sivaraman wants to mention is, it's more tilted to the owner. So risk is getting covered for them, but not for the contractors.
It is both way. It is given chance for the contractor as well to argue for the delays. In the case of delays also, there will be hindrance register, which will tell you about who is responsible for the delay. Accordingly, that will be fixed and that that issue will be settled. Then delays will invite the cost increase. So if the delay is due to the contractor, the cost increase will not be eligible for him to get.
Okay.
So many things are properly integrated in CPWD manual.
Okay, so the cost index for CPWD gets. At times, I feel the index of the city index, what they provide, is not sufficient enough, which reflects the real market situation.
Yeah, it is to some extent it is correct.
So in that case, the contractor suffers.
Yeah, they are taking India as a total region, and in Kerala situation, sometimes we also find it very difficult.
It's truly difficult because the labor condition is entirely different from the other states.
Yeah,
and also the material situation is also actually the procurement situation, the supply is completely different from the other states. Wherein a simple example, if you get a lot of sand for 1,000 to 10,000 rupees in Bangalore, here it is probably 3 times or 4 times of it.
Yes, exactly.
Just a simple example. And everything is higher. So and I mean the SOR is also probably obsolete. You have to work on the SOR and then you have to put a percentage over it. So those burdens are there when you consider CPWD contracts.
But nowadays the revision of the SOR, schedule of rates, are very frequently done in a year.
It is done, sir. So just to give you perspective, I'm doing one small government project in Hyderabad, right? And the SOR what they have and what my design team has provided, it's completely different, right? So I have to go and get market rate for each and every item. 90% of item I have to get the rate. SOR does not cover it.
No, before tendering, you have to look into which SOR the tender or BOQ was prepared. If it is not current, make it current, then go for tendering.
So the question what Nebu was saying, that whether the SOR is adequate, probably not, because I don't think the SOR reflects today's material palette what is available in market.
Latest 2019 has come up in office. Latest one is also there.
No, I'm talking about the material palette, sir. I'm not talking about the latest. 2020 is also there. The question is, do we have, because we are taking lots of imported material, we have lots of options available domestically.
True.
Not each and every item is available. That is what the question is.
Okay.
True.
Right. I think Balu had mentioned about plant and equipment. So Balu, I mean, the right way to guide is you need to decide what is correct for the project. I mean, if I'm doing a super high-rise tall building of 300 meters, I will need the self-climbing scaffolding systems and the cranes and all, which I don't need for warehousing. So for each project, there is a different kind of P&M required. And once you break it down, you can put your prelims. Typically, percentage for P&M ranges about 3% and 5% in a standard project, but I have seen 15% as well. It again depends on the type of project's overall cost, because if you have a smaller cost which higher requirement, obviously the percentage goes up. So ideally break it down and then calculate. Don't go a percentage, otherwise you'll go wrong. Next question from Sayamani. Possible to implement V in government sector like PWD? Honestly, I don't think I am right person to answer. I have majority of my experience in private, but one way which you can try is if there's a sharing available. If there's a sharing available, then you can get the money from government.
Michelle, can I ask a question? Not a question, a suggestion. In most of the projects, the monitoring is done with MS project or Primavera. Correct?
Correct.
Which one is suitable for Indian situation?
MS project, sir.
MS project.
Yeah.
But in the case of MS project also, there are people doing it differently. Some people for an 8-story building, they break down the things BOQ into n number of activities. Means splitting, yes. splitting and making the printout also 1,000 pages.
Agreed, sir. So
is it a good thing, or we optimize this breaking down?
No, you
it
can
depends on the
optimize
level of control you want to have on a project. If you want to have more control on the project, you can split up to 8 level, 10 level. But it will increase your management cost. If you keep on monitoring, micromanaging the contractor, your management cost, project management cost will increase. So the international practice is splitting the WBS to 6 levels. Beyond 6 levels, beyond that it is uneconomical.
What is 6 levels? I don't think it is the right time to ask such a question. But I would like to know about what are the levels in this Microsoft.
The level 1 is your project title. Or level 1 or level 0 is your project title. Then going further, as you are saying that how the micromanaging activities. So in a WBS as a client, you don't have to monitor on a daily basis. Today, what is the quantity of concrete and which column they are reinforcing or concreting. Yes. Mm-hmm. You don't have to go that level as a client. So you can do it these things beyond 6 levels. You can leave it for the contractor to do a daily schedule, and then the contractor's planning engineer will further expand it onto micro activities.
But there is a paradoxical situation created in one of the projects where the mobilization advance has to be given within 10 days of signing the agreement and putting up the request by the contractor. But because of the breakdown, the works breakdown submission delays, it went up to 8 months. No mobilization advance. So he started stopping the work. So the entire purpose of this monitoring has been defeated in the very beginning itself. You think, you just imagine the situation. Contractor is asking for the mobilization advance, for which the works breakdown is to be submitted. So intense breaking down means he is not able to submit it properly. So the delay in mobilization advance, so the delay in the work. So the whole purpose of the monitoring has been defeated in the very first or second month itself. This is the kind of monitoring we embrace in our projects.
Why we say that the CPWD contracts are one-sided, because contractor is suppressed here, his rights are denied, and there is a reasonable level of WBS decomposition. True. So the client asked for too much levels, maybe.
Yeah, too much levels. Very, very bad. Yeah. Very, very bad situation.
So that creates a mess, actually. That creates a mess if you are too much, all right, I think we have to call it a day. It's already 9:30. It was a long session. Thank you, Mr. Vishal, for the wonderful session. It was a great time that we had together. Well, thanks to Mr. Rajendran, Tibu Thomas, Shivaraman, Himanshu, and all of you for opening up topics and discussions. And I would request all of you to come forward and ask and express your concern, so that we can all learn. This is a learning process. We can all learn together. When a concern comes up, when somebody raises a concern, it becomes a driving force for all of us to seek for a possible solution. So engineering is seeking for solutions. So basically, this gives us energy. When you guys shows your energy, then that becomes our energy to bring up more and more programs like this. So to Mr. Rajendran, this is our second program. We had a program. First program was on forensic structural engineering, in which we have discussed a lot of projects and a lot of cases where we faced a challenge or a failure We have analyzed the failure, and that was our first project. It was a truly wonderful program. Mr. Tibu was there, Himanshu was there. A lot of I think about 30 to 40 people who have attended that program has registered for this program also. And I'm so happy to see a lot of familiar faces here. We are getting closer and closer, so that we can do a lot of things together in the future. Well, this is an initiative to create quality and to maintain quality. So let us all come together and let us together work towards a quality lifestyle and a quality engineering. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Vishal. Thank you. Good night. So see you tomorrow, the same day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.